what can go wrong? That's what I ask. What can go wrong, and how could I kick an old genre in the butt? Like, how can I deconstruct a genre? How can I deconstruct a notion that you've seen so many times in movies?
Our guest for this episode is Aharon Keshales, a writer, director and producer from Israel. Back in 2013, Quentin Tarantino said Aharon's film Big Bad Wolves was his pick for Movie of the Year. Not bad going. Aharon's latest film, South of Heaven, stars Jason Sudeikis, who plays a convicted felon who gets early parole after serving 12 years for armed robbery. Upon his release, he vows to give his love, the dying Annie, played by Evangeline Lilly, the best last year of her life, but unfortunately, it's not that simple. South of Heaven is in US theatres and on video on demand and digital from the 8th of October 2021.
So Aaron, a few questions, I guess, to start. When did you know that you wanted to be a filmmaker? How did you go from that dreamer stage to the doer?
To be honest, I never thought I'm going to be a filmmaker. I started off as a film critic and scholar. I used to teach courses at the Tel Aviv University, and I used to write about films and dissect films for a living. And it was a student of mine and my ex-partner Navot Papushado who dared me to go into the film business. He was like, I'm like Marty McFly. When you call me chicken, I have to prove myself. So it was like, you're sitting behind the keyboard there and you're just saying stuff and telling people how they should do stuff. How about just putting your money where your mouth is and start directing and writing with me? So at the beginning, I was just coming for the ride and trying to understand what I'm doing. Together with him, he was my student. I was a teacher. I had more experience as a theoretician, and little by little, I started feeling that it's something I could definitely fall in love with. So I did Rabies that way, and I didn't think, I just wanted to make with him the first Israeli horror movie because nobody ever done it in Israel, and it was like a crusade because my student used to tell me, Aaron, why aren't there any horror movies? Why aren't there any genre films in Israel? And I was like, hey, you're right, go and do those films. So they didn't do it. I went and did it. So I see your teacher did it. So now you could do it. So I did Rabies that way. And then, I sat down and wrote Big Bad Wolves again with my ex-partner. And that became like a crazy success, even got into, Tarantino's point. He saw it and talked about it, and it became like a thing. But I'm coming from a very modest family, and I'm very humble. So I was like, "What's going on, man?" And then we started getting offers from the U.S. to direct movies, and more movies, and that's how it came to be. Like I never thought I was going to find myself as a filmmaker, let alone directing stars like Jason Sudeikis, Evangeline Lilly, and Michael Terry in my first English-speaking film. Like it's a dream come true.
And I loved what you talked about for a time you were focused on the theory of film and the theory of filmmaking. And then it sounds like you had to step into the practical elements of making films. What surprised you about filmmaking that maybe you didn't realize until you stepped into that role?
I think you were surprised like every day from every little thing because, I used to think, and I still think that a filmmaker really has a plan for everything he's doing, from, the shooting script to the way he edits the film, the sound design and the music, and everything needs to fall into place. But then when you start making movies and you understand like budgets, and you understand that there are 25 days sometimes to shoot a movie like I had on South of Heaven, and sometimes you have, less than that like I have on Rabies, then a whole new system of things that you don't think. Like when you're a theoretician or a film critic, you just sit and you think that, sometimes, not everybody, does these kind of things, but some of people think that, you get everything you want and you get everything you need, and you have and you have limited time and limited resources to make your movie. And that's how you feel when you watch a movie. But then when you get to the set and you get to see movies being done for like less than $5 million, sometimes less than 200K, and you get to see how much work has been done and how fast you need to move on a 25 days shoot, you understand that there are more components to making a good film than just a wishful thinking. It really is a miracle to make a movie and finish with a smile. You know, it's people take it for granted. You just, yeah, you make movies, you have fun, right? We have fun, but sometimes it takes years of your life. Sometimes things get, you know, even in South of Heaven, we changed the location from LA to Texas in a matter of weeks, because budget-wise it made more logic to come to Texas, and also the movie is set in Texas, so why shoot LA for Texas? But you know, suddenly it becomes like a whole different place. Suddenly it's not sunshine, it's raining in December, and then you need to change all your, you know, costumes and all your, you know, everything changes. So that's something you don't get while you're a film critic, because you see only the finished product and you get to judge the finished product. But as a film critic and a theoretician making a movie, you're dissecting every day of your being as a director and getting to know what really, how films are really being made, and what's, you know, all the imperfections that make a complete film.
That's incredible. I mean, that having to adjust that quickly. Now, in a 25-day shoot, I'm just curious, what, you know, who, as a director, who are the people that are indispensable to you to get that shoot completed within that time frame? Is there anybody behind the scenes that sticks out to you that, you know, if I didn't have them in my corner based on the role that they play, I probably wouldn't have gotten them done there? You know, this role is worth every penny to invest in.
Yeah, you need a great, your first AD is your best friend, because he, you know, he breaks down the budget, he breaks down the days of shoot and what you shoot in that day. So the better your first AD is, the better day he plans for you, and the better 25 days of shoot you'll have. Like, because if he's like making a mistake by taking two very distant location in the same day, you might fall behind schedule, and then you will not be able to complete your day of shoot. And then there's like a delay that you're chasing all through the shooting. Then you have the hands-on producer, which is like with you every day, and he makes sure that everything goes according to plan. And if you need another hour or two, he gives it to you. So they're the most valuable components from the production side. Creative side, you need to have a great DP who commands a crew of people that works very fast, because you need so many setups in a 25 days of shoot that everything needs to be on the fly. You cannot take, like, usually when you make like a 55 or 80 days of shoot, you could do a scene a day. Like, you just shoot one scene for a whole day. Sometimes you'll take one side for a whole day because you have that luxury. When you have 25 days of shoot and you have action sequences, you need to build a shooting script that will allow you to, A, shoot more days for the action sequence because that's what they need. B, you need to be aware that you will need to shoot sometimes 10 to 12 pages a day of dialogue in order to compensate for those action sequences. So your DP makes sure that he will make with you the best plan to capture everything you need for the, you know, the dramatic scenes, the comedy scenes, and the action sequences. And if he has a great crew of, you know, people that put the lighting on and make sure that everything is on the ready and on the fly, it would be perfect. And another guy that you are dependent on is the production designer, who has the entire team to make sure that every set is ready for you to shoot. And even the cover set, that in case of rain, you cannot shoot outside. There's already another scene that that happens indoors that you could drive fast and do it then instead of that one. And we had lots of those moments in South of Africa because we shot in December and January, January and February in rain in Dallas, and it was very cold. So, sometimes we needed to find a cover set for our. So you need, all your team is important, but these are the main people that will help you survive a very tight 25 days of shoot. And also, of course, the actors, like actors that, think fast, act fast, give you exactly what you need. That's the best thing to have, because if you have like an actor that needs like half a day to just understand what he wants to do, and he has like, that's gone. You will not finish the movie on time. You will have like 10 hours of overtime every day.
What is your process, your creative process for generating ideas, right? So someone said to you, Aaron, you should be a filmmaker, right? Let's like you talk about this in theory, let's put it into practice. And then you did. And now you've had a few films that you've written, directed. How did the ideas come to you? Do you have a process for generating new ideas, or do they come by inspiration?
Some come by inspiration. This one came by inspiration. We could talk about it after, I'll answer your question. But some of them are like, I have a method. Usually my method is, what can go wrong? That's what I ask. What can go wrong? And how could I kick an old genre in the butt? Like, how can I deconstruct a genre? How can I deconstruct a notion that you've seen so many times in movies? So when I did Rabies, I thought the best way to do a slasher movie is by allowing the slasher to fall asleep at minute 10 to 15, and then let all the other characters in the slasher movie, which are usually the protagonists or, the victims, kill each other because of, misunderstandings. And that, because I wanted to ask, what will be an Israeli take on the slasher film? What will make that an Israel? And I said, in Israel, we don't have we don't have serial killers back then. And usually, Israelis are known for doing like half the job done. So our killer will be that way. He will not get the job done. And that will enable me to say something about the violence and hot-tempered society in Israel. And with Big Bad Wolves, again, I asked myself, how can I kick the genre, like, the vengeful father genre in the head? So I said, let's put two genres in the same movies. Let's make a Dirty Harry movie about a vigilante cop, and let's make another movie about a grieving father and a avenging father. And those two narratives will get in the way of each other, and that will create a dark comedy. And with this one, I went on a very late honeymoon with my wife. I was 37, she was 39, and we wanted to compensate for 20 years of not being together, right? So you're trying to so we went on a very long honeymoon. It was like 6 months all over the world. And I understood that when you are 37 and you get married, you try to compensate for years of not being with her, and you want to give her everything that you would have given her if you were 20 years old or 25 or 28. So I felt for the entire process of our honeymoon, which was amazing, that it became this disproportionate, honeymoon that you only see in the craziest of romantic movies. And then I came up with it. I said, I want to write a movie about a guy who lost 12 years with the love of his wife. And now he wants to, put it all in 1 year and give her the best year of life, because she has 1 year left and he feels he robs her of everything she wanted to have. And then it hit me like that will be the movie. And because I'm wired a little bit to the dark side, I couldn't just make a romantic drama, or romantic comedy. So I had to have that accident that veers the narrative into those dark moments, because I wanted to ask, is there a way to make a movie about a guy whose intentions are the best, but sometimes, the best of intentions could go wrong? Like, it's too much of a good thing, a bad thing? Like, that was the question I wanted to ask. And of course, the meaning of time in romance. That was one of the things I wanted to ask. The other thing that brought me into, me and my co-writers into the world of South of Heaven was I always respect the idea that the best villain you can write is one that the hero plays the villain in his life. Because I think that's the best way to write villains. Like if you take Hans Gruber in Die Hard, that's why he's the best villains almost in action movies, because John McClane ruins his life, right? John McClane comes into his perfect robbery plan that he has planned for months and years with all his crew. And then one day, this Roy Rogers, John McClane guy, and ruins his life and kills him at the end. So if you see a movie or you write a movie through the lens of the bad guy, which also they did in Cobra Kai right now, it becomes this interesting notion that not a lot of people these days pay attention to. And when I sat down to write South of Heaven with my co-writers, I knew I wanted to make this equation a little bit off. Like, is the bad guy, or is he now the victim of his own doing? And again, you could ask that about Jimmy Ray too. So that's how I come with the ideas. Like there's the inspiration, but then I ask almost theory questions, because I'm a film critic and a theoretician, about how I can, look for something that I know people should look for in movies these days. Like, how can I make it different? Like, how can I make a shootout at the peak of a movie feel different than any other climax you saw in a revenge film? Like, how can I make you not root for violence? How can I make you think about violence again? So this is, and I did it also in Big Bad Wolves. How can I make a revenge movie that will be anti-revenge movie? Because I'm not pro, violence. I don't want people to take men. So I'm asking myself as a spectator, what can I do to make it hurt, or what can I do to make you think about violence in movies in the ways they used to in the 60s and 70s, like, with directors like, Sam Peckinpah or Robert Altman, that make things a little bit more complex than, just shooting and killing and, having the audience root for something that is obscene at the end of, when you think about it, it's you're not supposed to root for like hundreds of people being killed, but you still do. And I want you to ask yourself these questions while you watch movies.
You successfully talked about some of the themes of the movie, which I was really curious about. And so, pivoting to and staying with South of Heaven, I'm curious, we talked about some of the challenges of South of Heaven, right? So change of location, obviously some of the day-to-day challenges. What was the smoothest thing for you about South of Heaven? What ended up being maybe easier than you expected, and why?
Acting, actors, stars. I came from Israel. I directed stars from Israel, even in my first movie. Like in Rabies, it's like the biggest stars in Israel those days, like the Tom Cruises and, the George Clooney's of the world in Israel. When I was supposed to come to, the US, and Evangeline says yes, and Jason Sudeikis says yes, and Michael says yes, I'm like, how am I going to direct mega movie stars, like biggest comedians, biggest, a Marvel star, another Marvel star, and some of the greatest character actors like Shea Wiggum and Jeremy Bob. How can I even, what am I going to do? And then, the collaboration with them was so smooth and enlightening, because not only did they came with a lot of, respect to just the written word, they came to help me make a better film, which is not something that you take for granted, because sometimes, people are, they work, but none of this felt like work, because, every one of them enriched the script. that's what was the best thing I discovered on South of Heaven, that when you collaborate with actors that really, loves your, script, they want to invest themselves, and they have something you don't have. They have their perspective more of the character. It's more precise, because you write a lot of characters when you write a script, right? So you write this one and this one and this one and this one, but they tap into their own character. So they know what's lacking, what's missing, what could be added, what's the arc, and is the journey full? And are you like being artificial in some ways in some of the scenes, and they wanted to be more honest and real? And through the course of the movie, with my discussions and conversation with Evangeline and Jason, it became a better and more profound and deeper script. I could give an example with Evangeline that said, look, Aaron, the first scene where we enter the bathroom, it's a little bit cheesy. Because in original script, he pulls her into the bathtub, like the old, like a very schmaltzy Hollywood moment, right? And a couple days before that, I asked her to watch Sam Peckinpah's The Getaway to see how Ally McGraw and Steve McQueen have that beautiful reunion at the beginning of the movie. So she comes back to me and she says, I want something honest like that. And I said, let's talk about it. What do you mean more honest? Let's talk about it. And she said, look, a guy comes out of prison after 12 years. They haven't seen each other naked, maybe. There's shyness. There is awkwardness. There is remorse and regret, and maybe he feels a little bit guilt for what he did for her. I want all of these feelings to be filled into that scene. So she sent me back with homework, right? And then I'm rewriting for like 2-3 days those scenes, everything, where he touches his belly and she looks at the mirror, and they have this little introspection with themselves. And then there's like a moment on the bed, but it's full of awkward. It's like two teenagers trying to be together for the first time. So this is what happens when you work with an actor, and that's what made my life more rich on set, and while rewriting it with the actors.
I love that you're also, I always say I guess it's just because I love the filmmaking process, but what you're speaking to is the collaboration of film. I have two young boys, and I always like to sit through the credits of films because I want them to see how much goes into making films and how much collaboration there is. Did you, on South of Heaven, did you have a favorite scene to film?
It's the Beach Boys scene. When they sit on, it's like, usually when you do an action movie, of course, I like that. No, like for me, writing the Beach Boys scene was everything I wanted to show in this movie, because you don't get to see these kind of moments in action films anymore, or thrillers. You just don't. And I really wanted to capture a little bit of those 70s moments where you just tap into something real inside a genre that it needs to be a very lean machine, right? Lean, mean machine. And when I thought about making South of Heaven, I thought about those intimate scenes in Peckinpah's movies. In Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, there's this moment where he sits with the girl he never married on a tree, near a tree, and they talk about the fact that he never proposed to her, and then he proposes to her. But it's in the middle of a very brutal and violent movie, just minutes before she gets almost, I think she's raped or almost raped. Like, it's a very brutal film. But then there's this moment in time where you just get a glimpse of something real and something romantic. And because there's that juxtaposition between the brutal and the violent and the intimate and the romantic, it creates a little earthquake in your viewing experience. Sometimes it creates this kind of broken masterpieces, like Alfredo Garcia, where at the time where they're released, it's like, what are they doing? What this? But then, years later, people see these moments and they understand what Peckinpah tried to do. Or in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, when you have that sheriff being shot in the gut and dying on the river while Bob Dylan's Knockings on Heaven's Door plays in the soundtrack. Again, you see a guy, he's dying, but it's different. You see all of his emotion, you see remorse, you see regret, you see fear, and that creates a new level of drama within the movie that is very brutal, and it creates honesty. So when I wrote South of Heaven, I knew I wanted to capture moments that you don't usually get to see when you do like a tight suspense thriller, where you just allow the romance to catch your audience before you set them up on the road to nowhere, like to action. So that was my favorite scene. I also knew it was Evangeline Lilly's favorite scene, because you get to say something real about dying people, which sadly I've been around people who died of cancer, and there's this bipolar thing that happens to them where they're like could be happy and sad in like a minute in a term of 2 minutes. They could change from crying to laughing. So it was important for me to capture that moment, because that sets, and Evangeline talks a lot about it, that sets her character, like the way she's going to be portrayed for the entire movie. She is fragile yet tough. She's laughing and then crying, and that's the base. Like, I think once you enter that scene, you don't want anything bad to happen to these two lovebirds. And and the other scenes are like, every time you get to create a scene with Shea Wiggum, it's a blast. Like, every time you get to do something with him, if it's opposite Colter, Evangeline Sudeikis in the movie, it creates so much magic. It gives you something completely surprising.
I was looking on your Twitter recently, and I noticed that a lot of the people who tune into film forums are people who have an interest in film, actors, directors, writers, and want to learn something that they can apply to their own careers. And so furthering that, part of our career is sort of navigating the personal space. And without really going into detail, I noticed you mentioned recently that you had a few years where you were having some challenges and that there was someone who helped you through. Any advice? And look, we were in the midst of a global pandemic that is still lingering, right? Any advice for people that are going through similar struggles to what you went through, about things that they can hold on to, or ways that you found getting through was easier?
I think the world became for me crazy. I think everybody feels that way during COVID. I think people became more secluded than before. People are creating bubbles for their families, and not a lot of people. There are a lot of people that don't have those families and don't have this. I have a lovely wife, which helped me a lot too. But then you have to find yourself. I feel that way in this world, and especially through this pandemic, you need to find, or I hope everybody could find some people that, even if you cannot meet with them, because you don't live in the same country or even the same continent, that see you for what you are, because Twitter is like a great big thing, and it could come out of hand, and not everybody is positive, and about that experience. So for me, it was like I think when you become older, you understand that you need to navigate your life towards the people that know who you are and loves you for who you are, and could be there for you at the worst of times and the best of times. So that's what I tried to do during the pandemic, because you spend most of your younger life trying to make everybody love you and everybody understand you. But, as you become older and older, you understand that not everybody will like you and not everybody will understand you. And that's okay. You just need to let go of that and be with the people that, know you for who you are and wants to be for you. and just give them the world, right? They're their bubble, they're your world. And once that world is yours to live in, you just see the positivity everywhere. And I think that's what I learned during COVID, like creating your bubbles, enlarging them, but making sure that you let yourself absorb love instead of just people that make you feel bad about yourself, or have negative feelings.
Absorb love. I mean, that message I think is needed personally. What do I know? But I think that message is needed more than ever. What before we sort of part, is there anything that you'd like us to touch on before we wrap up today?
This movie is about love, so for me, that's why you hear me, transmitting all that, because I do feel that you need to, to find that in every, not only in the world, even as a screenwriter, just try to find what you love in every character you write. And I think that when you connect to that emotion, beautiful things will come.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate your time, Aaron. I wish you all the best of luck with the movie South of Heaven. Excited to see it. And please, if you enjoy this interview, if you enjoy what Film Forums is doing, just want to remind you to subscribe, and we'll definitely see you soon.